Hello, guys. Welcome to Captain Dorja's Armory. This is Captain Dorja. Today, I wanted to talk about destroyers and torpedoing. What I want to talk about is what I consider basically the three methods of torpedoing. This is mainly to do with destroyers. As we all know, there are many other ships in the game that carry torpedoes, many cruisers. Every Japanese cruiser except the Tier 2 Chikuma is armed with torpedoes. The Tier 7 Premium American cruiser USS Atlanta is armed with torpedoes, as well as the cruisers Murmansk, Marblehead, and Phoenix, which are all variations on the Omaha class. And then, of course, the Omaha herself also carries torpedoes as well. And even the German battleship Tirpitz also is armed with torpedoes. And then, of course, we have air-launched torpedoes from aircraft carriers. But mainly, what I want to talk about is destroyer torpedoing. Now, you can use some of these tactics, and you will use some of these tactics in your cruiser torpedoing situations, and there's even other types of torpedo attacks that you'll do with destroyers, but these are the three main ones that I want to consider, and these are essentially offensive torpedo methods. And those three methods are stealth torpedoing, ambush torpedoing, and YOLO torpedoing. Now, if you saw the video I put up a couple weeks ago, the World of Warships Farragut Melee video that I was shown right here, I touched on this a little bit in that video as I was playing the Tier 6 USS Farragut. And I wanted to just expand upon what I talked about a little bit in that video. So that's what I want to do today. Now, let's go over to the Tier 6 Mutsuki, the Japanese destroyer, and let's talk about stealth torpedoing. Stealth torpedoing is what Japanese destroyers really excel at. It's kind of their racial trait, is the Japanese torpedoes can stealth torpedo. And what that means is they're able to fire torpedoes from outside of the range where their ship is detected and able to hit at the enemy with total impunity. But it gets a little bit more complicated than that, and we'll talk about and we'll demonstrate some of the ways that this can go wrong in battle. But first of all, let's talk about what it actually means to be able to stealth torpedo. So the first thing you need to know is you need to know your torpedo range. Now, the torpedoes on the Mutsuki have a very good range of 10 kilometers, and they're reasonably fast at 59 knots. Generally, when you stealth torpedo, fast torpedoes are better because they reach the position where the enemy ship is quicker, giving less time for the enemy to detect the torpedoes or for the enemy to just randomly change course and speed, causing your torpedoes to miss. So generally, a faster torpedo means your ship is going to be better at stealth torping. So 59 knots on these torpedoes is actually kind of not that good, but it's good enough. Kind of an example of where the torpedo speed can really start to throw you off is the torpedoes on the Gremyashki. They're good torpedoes. They do a lot of damage. They reload quite quickly. They have a nice long range of 8 kilometers, enabling you to stealth torpedo. But they only go 55 knots, so they don't go through the water that fast, and the enemy has a lot of chance to just evade them totally on accident without even meaning to. So the next thing that you need to know in order to stealth torpedo is you need to know the detection values of your ship. In this case, you find those under the concealment tab. The Mutsuki will be detected by enemy ships at a range of 6 kilometers, and it will be detected by airplanes at 3.1 kilometers. So I want to take a look at a really cheesy kind of graphic that I made in MS Paint to just kind of more demonstrate more visually what I'm talking about. So here's the map, hotspot. This is just the hotspot mini-map. I don't know what's going on down here, but whatever. So this green triangle represents the position of my destroyer. This giant red thingy is an enemy battleship. Now the green line represents the range at which this battleship will detect me. So he would need to be closer to my ship, located inside the circle, to even know that I'm here. Now, this gray line represents the range of my torpedoes. So as long as this battleship is within the gray line, I can launch torpedoes and they theoretically can hit him. And he won't even know I'm there until he enters the area bounded by this green circle. So I can fire torpedoes in this, hypothetical situation. I could fire torpedoes at this battleship, and there's nothing he would be able to do about it to know that I'm there or that the torpedoes are coming until they're about roughly 1 to 2 kilometers away. So that's kind of the gist of it with stealth torping. Now, the reason why American destroyers don't stealth torp is because they can't. This is the Tier 7 destroyer for the U.S. Navy, the USS Mahan. Now, if you take a look, the Mahan's got a surface detectability range of 7.7 kilometers, but my torpedoes only have a range of 4.5 kilometers. So I have to travel, 3.2 kilometers of distance with the enemy already having seen my ship before I'm even close enough to launch. And during that time, the enemy can change course, the enemy can shoot me and kill me. There's a lot of things they can do. But you might say, well, those are the stock torpedoes on the Mahan, and that is true. But the upgraded torpedoes only have a range of 6.4 kilometers. So I'd still have 1.3 kilometers of ground that has to be covered before I'm within range to launch the torpedoes with the Mahan. And that's why you really can't stealth torpedo with the American destroyers until you get the fully upgraded Tier 8 USS Benson. From there on, you can. But from Tier 2 to Tier 7 with the American destroyers, you cannot stealth torpedo. That's why American destroyers rely on ambush torpedoing. So here's my little graphic, just kind of again visualizing why American destroyers can't stealth torpedo. Again, the green line represents the green triangle represents my destroyer. The red thingy here represents an enemy battleship. If that battleship comes within this green circle, he'll detect me. But I won't be able to fire torpedoes at him until I have him within this gray circle right here. So the gray circle being a lot smaller means that he'll see me the whole time I'm covering this gap. And in that time, he can either hide, kill me, or just avoid my torpedo attack altogether. So with American destroyers, what you had to do is you had to do a lot of ambush torpedoing. And this is, again, kind of a pretty crappy little picture. But the idea is that with ambush torpedoing, you use a terrain feature like an island to camouflage your position so that the enemy can't see you until they're already within striking distance. So as this battleship comes around this corner, suddenly there's an enemy destroyer named me, say 3 kilometers away, already loaded for bear, ready to drop torpedoes on him. Because this island prevents the enemy from detecting me way out here, he comes into my torpedo range without knowing it, and by then, hopefully, it's already too late, and all he can do is eat my torpedoes and die. So we are definitely going to take a look at a bunch of different situations in battle. But before I do that, I want to plug a hilarious YouTube video. If you go, I will definitely link this in the description. If you go to the channel of Fontaman and look at Widespread Panic and Fear, it is an absolutely hilarious video of him ambush torping with the Tier 6 Farragut. It is one of the funniest things out there. You should definitely check it out. Links for that in the description. I don't have a little graphic about YOLO torping because it doesn't really need one. So we'll talk about that in battle. So guys, let's take some of these various destroyers into battle and observe these different kinds of torpedo attacks. Alright guys, quickly before we go into these battles, I want to touch on the torpedo aiming system and the torpedo controls. I'm sure you already know how torpedoes work by now, but it is worth mentioning, so I'm going to touch on it quickly. Here we have a screenshot from my World of Derps video when I tried to torpedo that Fuso and left him on like 1,000 health. Now, you select torpedoes by pressing the 3 button in a destroyer, and you can choose to set your torpedoes to a narrow spread or a wide spread by cycling the 3 key to switch back and forth between them. In this shot, I have my torpedoes on narrow spread. Generally, I use narrow spread pretty much all the time. Most of the time when I'm firing torpedoes, I'm firing them where I'm confident of getting any hits at all. And with a narrow spread, it means that if my torpedoes are going to be in the right place at all, I'm going to get the most number of hits. So I usually go with the narrow spread. I very rarely use the wide spread at all. Now, you have this green arc that you can see sweeping back, and this is the arc where your torpedo launchers can train. So if you try to fire torpedoes where my cursor is moving right here, that's outside of the torpedo training arc, and you wouldn't be able to fire them. You'd have to turn the ship. Now, what we have, this right here overlaid on top of this gray cone, is the actual aiming arc of the torpedoes, and you can see it's green, and that means that the torpedo tubes are loaded. When your torpedo tubes are empty, that arc will show yellow. The gray field that you can see underneath the green cone, that's the torpedo target lead indicator. By default, you lock onto a target by putting your targeting reticle on the target of choice and pressing X. That'll lock you onto that target, and that'll give you a target lead indicator for torpedoes. Now that lead indicator assumes that the course and speed of the enemy isn't going to change at all. So you can use that target lead indicator to tell whether or not enemies are turning or changing speed. If the target lead indicator doesn't move at all, they're holding steady on their course and speed. If the target lead indicator is fluctuating, it means the target is turning or changing speed. So you don't always want to just fire straight down the target lead indicator. What I tend to do is when I'm torpedoing at a battleship, battleships tend to turn away from the torpedo attack. So what I usually do is I usually fire one spread of torpedoes down the lead indicator and the other spread of torpedoes in front of it, farther down the battleship's line of travel. Because as the battleship turns away from me, the torpedoes are going to have to travel a longer distance, which means the battleship will have gone farther forward. So I'll fire one spread of torpedoes right here, down the lead indicator, and the other spread I'll usually fire ahead of the battleship, so that as he turns this way, he'll avoid some of my first torpedoes and then steer right into the rest of my other ones. That's what I usually do with battleships, and that tends to work pretty well because battleships don't turn very quickly. Now against cruisers, I usually do the opposite. Here's another screenshot from that same video of me torpedoing at a cruiser. Now in the actual video, I fired all my torpedoes right down the lead indicator. I didn't think the cruiser would be able to turn sharp enough to avoid them. Well, he ended up being able to get through all of them, and he only took one hit, and it did almost no damage. So when I launch torpedoes at cruisers, I tend to fire the torpedoes inside the target lead indicator, closer to the cruiser's bow, because cruisers usually avoid torpedoes by turning into the torpedoes. Because they're able to turn a lot more sharp than battleships, they usually end up avoiding the torpedoes by turning into them. So if you fire your torpedoes a little bit more towards their bow from the target lead indicator, you a lot of the time will get more hits. And in this case of the actual screenshot here, I didn't expect to see this guy quite so close. Honestly, I panicked a little bit and I just shot him, and they all missed. So that's kind of my little spiel about aiming of torpedoes and how I aim myself with them in battle. Now, it gets a little more complicated against destroyers because they're so fast and agile. With destroyers, you gotta really feel it, and a lot of the time, you gotta be super close. That's really all I can say about that. So now, guys, let's get into battle, and let's take a look at all these things I've talked about in the garage and in various cheesy MS Paint screenshots. Alright, guys, so first we're going to look at a couple of stealth torp situations. Now, in this clip, I'm in the Mutsuki, the Tier 6 Japanese destroyer, and the first thing that I want to point out just like I just said in chat, there's 3 U.S. Navy destroyers in this match. So initially I was not that excited about that. There's 2 Nicholases and a Farragut. Now those destroyers are really dangerous to Mutsuki, and they can really screw up my plans for ambush torping, or for stealth torping, I mean, by intercepting me before I can get into position and spotting me, forcing me to either run or fight. But even just detecting me can ruin everything, because the whole point of stealth torping is you do it undetected. The enemy has no idea torpedoes are coming or where they're coming from. So you have to look at the team list, look at the targets the enemy has, and try to figure out what you want to go after and where you need to put yourself to run into those targets, and how you want to approach them to avoid potential problems. Now, I want to come over around here somewhere to fire torpedoes through this gap at battleships in here, because the New Mexico and the Myopi, those are my targets. Generally, when I torpedo attack, I try to pick on battleships as much as possible. They're the most vulnerable. They're the biggest targets. They're the slowest. They maneuver the worst. They have the slowest firing guns. They traverse and reload their guns slowly. Battleships don't react well to the changing situation. Our team has taken the lead. So that's why I like to go after them with my torpedo attacks. So I'm coming over here to look for these battleships. Now, I'm also coming in and capturing the B point, which, even though there's a high likelihood of encountering the American destroyers in the B capture point, sort of patrolling it, I think that as a destroyer on my team, it's not only my job to try and torpedo stuff, it's my job to secure the B point. Now, I just fired torps at this New Mexico. He's 8.2 kilometers away, so he's well within my range, and he isn't going to detect me. I fired one set of torpedoes just about straight down the lead indicator, and I fired the other set of torpedoes to the left of the lead indicator, expecting the New Mexico to either hold course or turn to the New Mexico's right. So that would make one of those 2 batches of torpedoes run into him. That, at least, is the plan. Now, it's worth noting with stealth torpedoes that it takes them a long time to reach the target. And at any point during that period of time, an airplane could fly over the torpedoes, or another ship could drive close enough to them to spot them and alert the enemy player to their presence. Now, right there, no such luck for that New Mexico. He didn't spot those torps until it was too late, and he ate 3 of them and lost a lot of his health. So that was fortunate for me. The other thing that can happen in the runtime of your torpedoes is the target can just maneuver. If that New Mexico had just suddenly decided, oh, I think I'll go to the other side of that island, my torpedoes would have never hit him. Also, another thing that's worth mentioning is you have to be careful of how close to the limit of the range the target is when you fire. So I fired another set of torpedoes at that New Mexico right there. Now this Minikaze on my team is probably going to blow it, because he's in really close and he's blowing smoke, so everyone knows there's a destroyer there for sure now, and I get spotted by the Nicholas. So the likelihood that that New Mexico is going to take a hit from any of my torpedoes is almost 0. But as I was saying, you need to pay attention to the range of your torpedoes, because torpedoes take a long time to reach the target. So during the time that your torpedoes are in the water, the target may just point his stern at your torpedoes and run. And, for example, if you're in this destroyer right here, the Mutsuki, and there's a Congo-class battleship 8 kilometers away from you, driving straight away from you at 27 knots or something like that, he's probably going to go so far that your torpedoes would just never reach him before they ran out of fuel, so you do have to take that into consideration. Now, that's pretty much all I want to show from this clip. Really, there's no more, there's nothing else for me to show for stealth torping. I do in this match go on and just butcher both of those enemy carriers, but they make it pretty easy for me. But that really has nothing to do with stealth torping. So I'm going to cut this one off, and we'll take another look, another example of some stealth torpedo action. Alright, so in another battle with the Tier 6 Mutsuki, and on this match, the enemy team has all deployed pretty much right in this little box, this little circle right here, and our team is basically split into a tiny group and a big group and gone the other way. Now, what I'm going to be doing in this match is I'm going to attack these guys from behind and try to draw them back towards the rest of my team. That was my plan, at least. But when this Atlanta started shooting, he kind of managed the draw the enemy thing pretty well, so I didn't really end up having to do it. Now, honestly, I forget who my original target for these torpedoes was right off the bat, but looking at ranges and angles, I'm guessing it was the Colorado, because for one thing, the Colorado was heading almost straight parallel or perpendicular to the direction my torpedoes will come from. The Colorado is also a pretty slow target, so he's a good one to aim at. And he's also at a nice range of about 8.7 kilometers. So I've just fired those torpedoes. No one on the enemy team has the slightest inclination that my ship is here. And I have 6 torpedoes just heading right to the enemy, and they don't know that I'm here, and there's frankly nothing they can do about it except steer evasively. So the torps are going in. I switched to torpedo viewing mode. I apologize, it's a little stuttery. There's not a lot I can do about that. And I don't actually score any hits on the Colorado. He turned to his left and got out of the line of fire, but the cluster of enemy ships was so dense, I managed to score a hit on an Atlanta and another hit on an Aoba and really do a lot of damage to them. Now, it is worth mentioning that when you fire stealth torpedoes, expect to miss a lot. Now right here, I'm lining up on the New York. He is very close to my detection range. If I get much closer to him, he'll actually spot me, but he's a really good target for a stealth torpedo attack. So I fire my torpedoes and I pull away. And I really want to get away. I do not want to get spotted by that Baltimore or that Pensacola or that Aoba. Those cruisers will really damage me. So I put my torpedoes out on this New York, and we're just watching them run in. Again, in torpedo following mode. Again, it's kind of stuttery. This New York didn't change course or speed, so the 3 that I fired down the lead indicator, straight into him. 2 hits, knock out his engines, and do 22,000 damage. That's a pretty devastating hit, especially considering that that New York had really no idea that I was there and absolutely no way to strike back. I've been pretty fortunate with my torpedo hits in this match. I've fired 12 and I've hit with 4. That's a lot higher hit percentage than I normally achieve. Usually when I'm stealth torping, I generally expect a hit ratio of somewhere between 10 to 15%, which is pretty low. A lot of the time I'll fire 30 to even 40 torpedoes and only hit with 2 or 3, maybe 4. So that's not a lot of hits, but that's just kind of the way it is. If the enemy team is smart and take preventative measures, it can be pretty hard to hit with your torpedoes. And when I say take preventative measures, what I mean is don't sail in straight lines. Don't sail at a constant speed.
Our victory is in sight.
Don't be amazingly predictable. That sort of thing. So that's pretty much the end of this replay for as far as the stealth torpedoes. The rest of the action that I'll be taking in this game, I'm actually doing it spotted. I force this Fubuki out from behind the island and then torpedo and shoot at that Fuso quite a bit. So that's really all there is for the rest of the stealth torping. So I'm going to cut to the next clip. Well, guys, I've decided I'm going to split this methods of torpedoing video into 2 parts because I've only covered the port section information that I wanted to cover and ambush torpedoing, and I'm already going on 26 minutes, and with 5 more clips for the other 2 methods I want to talk about, this video would have ended up being about 57 minutes long, and that's a little bit too long even for me. So I'm going to cut it off right here, having gone over sort of the generals of everything and the specifics of stealth torping, and I will finish up with ambush torpedoing and suicide torping later this week. I will probably try and do that video either on Saturday or on Sunday. So look for the torpedo methods part 2 type deal here coming up sometime this weekend. And guys, until then, just remember, you can never have enough big guns. Oh, I was hoping that one shell would sink that Cleveland. Anyway, guys, peace out.